Good morning. Good morning. Today is Monday, May 1st, 2023. Monday class. We don't usually do Mondays, but sometimes we have to. Rather than not have it at all, at least those of you who can make it are here. So let's set our intention, make aspirations by saying four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Okay, so we did a review last week. So today we'll just we'll sit. Let's get into our posture. And start focusing on the breath. We're timeless. We'll do a little bit longer today than usual. Okay. Those of you who are new, you may be just focusing on the breath, the space right between the upper lip and nostrils where the air moves in and out. And focusing your attention there. And the key is noticing when your thoughts begin. Notice that you're thinking. And just take notice. Don't follow. Don't push away. Just notice it. And then go back to focusing on the breath, or those of you who work with the other technique, the visualization of that clear, limitless, stainless blue sky. The thought is like the cloud that has arisen, and when you notice the fact that you're thinking, you watch the cloud dissipate as the thought dissipates. So what we're really doing here is watching the mind looking at mind looking at what's going on within it. So much of our reactions and habitual reactions and thoughts that arise are based on habitual patterns. Especially in relationships that are ongoing, long-term relationships, things, that fit in. The habitual patterns that we develop often we're very unconscious to. And at first, we don't need to change these things or do. We're just right now. We're just noticing it, not justifying it, rejecting it, just noticing. Back to the breath. Notice and dissolve. Notice and let it dissolve. You're not really dissolving. It's dissolving on its own, really. So give it a little space. And then we settle into that very space. You may notice you have a lot of thoughts. That's okay. Or it may be a day that you don't have many thoughts. You have a lot of moments of without thought and clarity, or just quiet. That's okay too. Don't get attached to it. Don't use it as this was this week. It's got to match that or be better next week. It's not about that. It's just the presence of now, the experience. That's all we're working with. If you feel really uncomfortable or tense and you need to shift, you can do it. Whatever, you know what I mean? Shift in place, then settle back into the posture. Back to the breath, back to the sky. Settle into that clarity, that limitless expanse, clear, stainless, open. It's always there and therefore always accessible. Back to the breath. And back in the sky. If your mind feels particularly busy, you can lower the angle of your gaze slightly. That may help slow the mind a bit. And if you feel really sluggish, like you're falling asleep, you can raise the angle of your gaze, and that may wake you up a bit, just slightly. You'd be surprised at how a slight shift in that can have effect. Great, that was great. Um, as you do this, you really start to see the temporal nature, of the thoughts and how they come and go. Some thoughts may return, but they do ultimately don't uh, have essence, and I think it's also important that meditation is really important now in our society now because our minds are very, very busy. Besides just, when before the internet, before I had a cell phone, my mind was busy, of course, as a human being. But now that we're constantly uh, connected to devices, receiving information, algorithms, through social media, through news media and medias that we consume and stuff, our mind is busy both from within and without. So all this information that we take in on this constant basis starts to inform, and it's designed the way we receive it through algorithms and the way it's programmed. We start to become these things that really are not real, right? That they're very temporary things, and often things that are not very relevant per se. And we start to see all that, those thoughts, the thoughts that we generate from within, the information we receive, starts to create this reality that we really make solid and attach a lot of meaning to, but we attach it as our identity. So working with the mind and meditation is really important because what we start to see is that the thoughts are not necessarily who we are. They're not who we are. We think they are. When we talk about habitual patterns, like I said, especially in your immediate relationships, work relationships, close family relationships, somebody says a certain thing, they say it a certain way, and immediately our emotional reaction comes up, our intellectual reaction comes up, how we want to respond to that. And it's based on history, it's based on maybe absolutely not who you are today in that moment. So we have to start to see that we're not our thoughts. I liken it often to like sometimes when you eat something, you get indigestion, right? You're not indigestion. It's like the food reacted with you in a certain way, and then it passes and it goes. Often our minds react to a certain external stimulus in a certain way, and a thought comes up that could be quite unpleasant, judgmental, mean, defensive, hateful, all those things, desirous, jealous, prideful, arrogant, all those things. And then we complicate that by saying, I'm arrogant, I'm hateful, I'm this, as if the thought is us, and it's not. It's almost like an indigestion of the mind. It's like something that's reacting to a situation, that's getting in the way between you and the world. It's your way of, maybe in the past, how you coped. Maybe it's just learned behavior. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we start to see that it's not reality. It's not who we are. That the clarity and that calm that we're discovering when we meditate in that spaciousness that we're creating, that's really who we are. Because if you notice, the thoughts may be very different week to week, day to day when you sit and meditate. And they're often based on how, what happened yesterday, what's happening today, what you have to do today. But then you start working with the mind, and you always can access that clarity and that calm, that true nature of mind. It's always there. That doesn't change. The nature of that doesn't change. Some days it may be harder to get there and take a little more effort or work, but that's always there. So I think it's advantageous to start to relate to that sky, that clarity, that openness, that calm. Relate to that more as who we are than this, constant river of thoughts, that arise, when we interact with the world based on, our habitual patterns and tendencies and things, both, from our own view and from the input we're receiving from other people, and especially from, let's face it, we receive a lot of information and input, sensory input, through, electronics, through devices that are very carefully engineered to appeal to you, to make you want more of it. And not only that, to make you think that the information you're consuming is correct and right and what you should be thinking. And I think it's important, that we go beyond that a little bit, maybe a lot. Okay, Victoria's going to speak for a bit, and then we'll take some questions.
Good morning. So kind of exactly what Michael was saying, we never really discuss these things, but everything always happens like this in tandem. We're always on the same pattern in terms of what we want to emphasize that particular in a particular day. What I wanted to start with is to say that Buddhism is not an idea. It's not an axiom. It is not a theory. Buddhism is a discovery of how things abide, how the world abides. Like what Michael was saying, we're distinguishing the sky. We connect to the sky, but we see the relative level. The sky is the ultimate level, and the clouds are the relative level. Buddha had this experience, and that teaching is what we call Dharma. Dharma points to the nature of mind, to the sky, and distinguishes it from the movement, which the clouds, although they're always in union. Dharma points to the nature of mind. Buddha teaches us about the nature of mind, and our teachers, the Sangha, teaches, all are there to point to the nature of mind. To the nature of mind in a discoverable sense, not like a set of axioms. You got to do this, here's the text, you got to believe this, etc., etc. No, you are encouraged to go and find it for yourself. It's like a scientific empirical advance. Once the church and kind of the dominant opinion of the day, the ignorance, said that we are the center of the world, the earth, and the sun and the stars are circling around us, or just hanging around in this tapestry of the sky, and we are the center. The kingdom of our religion is the center, and that was to be accepted and held as the truth. And when the first astronomers proposed that Earth was just one of the many planets orbiting the sun. At that time, we didn't even know the universe. It was just the little solar system. But when these discoverers said, no, our planet and us, our kingdom of, of all this religiosity and everything is but one of, many or several planets circling around the sun, they were burned like Giordano Bruno. Copernicus, who was a Christian monk, admitted this very same thing, observation. He knew that we were circling around the sun on our planet, driving in our car. He admitted that on his deathbed because he knew what would happen if he said it earlier in his life. That's what happens a lot of times to discoverers when the mental atmosphere is still so dominated by thickness of ignorance, and that is held to be the truth. That's like the paradigm everybody's supposed to adhere to. So scientific advances are often paid in blood. And so I feel like, in many ways, Buddhism is very much like that self-discovery for which we have to pay. And we have to fight for it very much with our teeth and nails. We have to fight against lifetimes and lifetimes of habitual patterning and ignorance that is like our personal ignorance, and of course the common ignorance through virtue of speaking a language, through virtue of abiding in a culture, through virtue of all this informational ocean that Michael is talking about. All that we have to fight to get to the real discovery, and not just take this verbatim crap, this and this is so, and accept this, just get stuffed like a little teddy bear with that stuffing of all this, stuff. But no, in Buddhism, we are encouraged to find, to discover, to make the personal empirical discovery of our true nature. Likewise today, even if we mention mind or awareness outside of physiological context of the brain and physical chemistry, we have the same attitude like the early Christian fathers or dictators who decided for us what the truth is and what is circling around what. So I just made this observation. This is not a criticism of any religion, but I made that observation in order to say that Buddhism is not a religion. It's not an axiomatic propositional doctrine. It is something we have to discover for ourselves. It's like we have to take that spaceship and go to the moon in order to say, it exists, it's a place. We are encouraged, Buddha, Dharma, Buddha, and our teachers, the Sangha, all encourage us to get on that spaceship and make that journey. That's what meditation is about. One of these hypothetical truths is that I exist, like this ignorant fool, the doctrinal orthodox thing, is that I exist and that things out there exist in themselves. That's kind of the common scientific theory of the moment. But Buddha had an experience of enlightenment which breaks this theory, like the early hypothesis about the planets. We are not the center of the universe. We are not even solid, and things out there are also composed of our perceptions. They're part something and part perception. We don't have experiences which are not perceptions. We don't have experiences which are not identifying things. And to identify anything, we have to say, when we say something is this, at the same time, we're saying this thing is not all those other things. So this selectivity, this naming, this labeling, and that we perceive in reaction to this labeling is tells us that there is no solidity. It's just compositional, and it has compositional part, perceptual material, and my mind based on this informational pool of how I process all this information. Experience of enlightenment also revealed to Buddha that conceptual ground of awareness, the space of all possible experience which precedes all qualities and interpretations, the ground, what we call the nature of mind, the sky in which the clouds take space, is unchanging, and it is the mind of all sentient beings, all of sentient beings. It is not my mind, not your mind, not his mind, not their mind. It is the ground of all sentience. It is the ground of us being able to be sentient. It is like all electrical devices. They're nothing if they cannot be plugged into the electrical network. Without electricity, none of these things are powered. And likewise, our experiences that are based on awareness. If without awareness, they're like without electricity, they don't exist. They're nothing. Uh, so this unchanging nature of the mind of all sentient beings, it's not like our bodies or our brains. It's something in which we occur all the time. It is indescribable because it is pre-conceptual. Conceptual mind is derivative, and we'll discuss this in a minute. So Buddha discovered, like those early Western scientists, astronomers, that the I, the ego, is not the center of the universe. And the objects I perceive and call my world are not hanging in the ceiling like decor for me to gaze on them and experience them and then kind of like categorize them. This is brain, this is this, etc., etc. Buddha discovered that these presumptions are like the very ignorance of the early model of the universe, and that this ignorance obscures and prevents us from knowing how reality really is. Because think about it, if we take this dogmatic view, it precludes us from looking anywhere else. So it closes the door. It like shuts down the shutters on the windows of awareness. It makes us blind. He experienced the nature of all suffering as this composite work of ignorant mind that takes itself as this autonomous I that sees and directs phenomena like a director in the movie, much like an omnipotent God of our standard religious theories. But nothing can be further away from the truth. If this I, me, I, if this was stable, unchanging, like we pretend that it is, then how could your words, his words, their words, could affect me, whether these words are flattering? How could they hurt me so much? And if these words are flattering, how could they make me feel so good about myself? How can these things, which are not even objects palpable in the world, how can they shift and affect my eyes so severely, so much? And this is what Buddha experienced, that the relative truth where suffering is happening, where this version of the I exists, exists so only in dependence on other things, in dependence on so many different things. I arise when you arise. Like if you say something hurtful to me, somehow the quality of my I now becomes so upset and so hurt and so terrified or whatever, and then angry. Or if you flatter me, you arise in that flattering, your energy comes to me because you have that intention to flatter me. And in that instance, I co-emerge with you as this, I'm so happy, I'm so pleased, I like you because you're flattering me. So this dance that is always happening is the reality of how we arise moment to moment. That's the clouds arise in this codependent manner. So the relative truth, because in Buddhism we're always dealing with the sky, the ultimate truth, and the clouds, the relative truth. And the relative truth is in the context in which we speak about how suffering arises, and the first teaching, suffering, the causes of suffering, and liberation. So the Buddha talks about this. And in terms of this relative level, the level of the clouds, we talk about several qualities: karma, cause and effect, impermanence, and co-emergence. This codependence and karma, cause and effect. You flatter me, I arise as this. you say negative something because you're afflicted, you afflict me and I become ill, my anger arises. I want to demolish you and now you're my enemy. So suffering, Buddha formulated that suffering is the way that I experience this movement, this dance, this river. If you say something hurtful to me, my ego doesn't like it. My affliction arises in form of anger. Anger is my suffering. It's not you, it's my anger that's burning me inside. So Buddha, in his first teaching, describes how we can liberate ourselves from suffering. And that prescription for that is understanding the non-existence of the I, that the I exists as this dance, and that if we connect to the ultimate nature, to the sky-like nature of mind, we see this dance, this cloud movement, we can deal with it in a very, very different way. Because if we, like children, think that these things are solid, they exist, I'm the center of the universe, how dare you say these things to me, you are the bad guy, we then don't understand that the affliction, the suffering is not the guy, it's the anger, okay? Because you could be, somebody could be cutting you and you can say, oh, that terrible guy, he's cutting me. But if you're not ignorant, if you understand karma, cause and effect, you may say, that man is a surgeon. He's actually cutting me to remove my cancer. So there are levels and degrees of understanding and interpreting everything. So when we can interpret things with the view to the two truths, the absolute, the sky, and the clouds, we start to understand karma, cause and effect in a very, very different way. That is the beginning of the path. That's where we can start to look to liberation. So to liberate ourselves, we have to know the truth, the union of two truths. And the relative truth, of course, is explained in terms of karma, ocean and its waves, how they pound us. In terms of absolute truth, often the metaphor is used of sky and clouds, because we know that the nature, the space of mind where all possible things arise, is immovable. Whether we can pretend to ourselves like we can bottle the space, the sky, put it in a bottle and contain it in there, that's just like being kids, but we have to leave this baby mind at home in order to liberate ourselves and in order to liberate all sentient beings. In terms of relative truth, karma, cause and effect, impermanence, interdependence are the base components. Think of them as the molecules, as the atoms. Like if somebody tells you your body is not solid because it's actually atoms and space between them, or whatever, particles and space between them, or molecules and space between them, you're okay with that. So this is how we have to start to understand in the same way this desolidification of these baby things, the orthodox things that we've held as opinions for such a long, long time. And so if I get sick based on my ignorance and addiction, when pleasure or food or drink are killing me, I have to start to understand that it's not that bad things are happening to me, who is such a good person. I'm starting to understand going to the causes of how these things happen. I'm starting to look and say, I wanted too much of that. It's my grasping that turned into addiction. I wanted more pleasure. I wanted more this. I wanted to experience, something more intensely. And as a result of it, I became addicted. So it's not like this mysterious cause that sets my body into illness. It's addiction. I do it. And karma, which is so important to understand, because the only way to liberate ourselves from karma is stop creating it, But first we have to understand what is karma. Karma is a corrective element. So when an illness happens to me, karma is happening to me. Karmic forces, they're like a red light. The karma is saying, stop. You have to stop, because past this point you won't bend, you will break. So now you're ill, you have to go under the knife, you have to have surgery, you have to go into rehab, you have to do this and this. So karma is not this bad thing that's happening to me. Karma is a course corrector. Karma is happening so that I can correct and divert my path from disaster, from, let's say, addiction or something like this, and correct myself and remove myself and stop being a factory of creating this karma and through afflictions to continue, with this illness. Uh, Karma is a red light. It says stop, change. It is a relative level. It's the ocean and the waves. On an ultimate level, our awareness is like space, cannot be caught, destroyed, or bottled. It will and always was and always will remain pure, immutable, like the sky, about which we cannot say anything, like space. We cannot say it exists or doesn't exist. Our labels don't apply. They don't matter. That's how the nature of our mind is. Clouds of disturbing emotions and afflictions arise in the limitless expanse of this space, of this luminosity, but they don't affect it. It's just the relative level where the suffering takes place. We take our afflicted mind as a path. So, like, I discovered that, I am addicted, or I am angry, or I am jealous. For example, when we use a little phrase like this, why did he get this job at work? For a Buddhist practitioner, he doesn't deserve this, I should have gotten this. That's baby talk, that's baby mind. It has nothing to do with the other person. First of all, if that person gets what they get, it's because their karma ripened. And the secondary circumstances came for him to attain that. It's because of merit that we get good things. Why didn't I get it? I didn't get that merit. My karma did not ripen to me getting it. Second of all, when we look at that phrase, why did he get it and I didn't get it? For a practitioner, that's where we work. That's the place of our job, that practice space. Because when I say that, my stinginess is in that, because I am stingy. I don't want him to get that thing. I cannot rejoice for that person getting that thing. My avarice is right there. My hungry ghost is right there. My anger is right there, because I am angry that he got it and I didn't get it. Of course, my ignorance is there because I don't understand the first and basic thing. He got it because it's his karma, and I didn't get it because my karma hasn't ripened to that. I have no merit. I didn't get it because it's not yet for me. My avarice arose, my anger arose, my arrogance arose because I'm saying to myself, how dare he get it and I didn't get it after all. So all these little subtle things are actually happening, and that's the path. That's where we take our mind as the path. That is the space of practice. So when we sit on the cushion, we learn all these emotional things are arising, but when we get up, we're watching our mind like a hawk day and night by connecting to the space of awareness and watching all these little clouds. And that little phrase, why did he get it and I didn't get it? That presents us with the space of practice and the space of where we can cut off being a karma endless karma producing factory. That space gives us the opportunity to, not be in this Dear Abby, circle. And after we finish the session, say, oh, what do I do with my difficult neighbor? What do I do with my difficult mother? No, we're here to practice. In this space, we are saying, if I call someone bad, it's my reaction. So let me unpack that. Let me work with my anger. Let me work with my judgment. And let me look at the causes of why this dance, of why this relationship arose as this negative dance. Let me not stabilize that person in that one moment of where I didn't like him and now call him my enemy. Let me unpack it and dissolve it. That's practice. That's liberation. In each and every instance, the place of difficulty is a perfect place for practice. We take our afflicted mind, we take the difficult situation, we take the suffering as the very essence, the ground for where we practice. That's our school. We sit down in that space and we go, oh, that person's difficult because he didn't say something to me I wanted to hear. I called him an enemy because he got sent because I wanted it. And here I'm looking at my avarice. Oh, I hate him because my arrogance is what blinded me. I really felt like I deserved it and he did not. So working with my arrogance. And then we have a chance to liberate ourselves and that person we call the enemy or whatever, we don't like him. We can liberate all that tremendous energy into joy and into being happy for him. And that's the entrance to the Buddhist path. Only then can we actually say the four immeasurables and not use them like babies in our mouths, like insignificant things. Only then do we understand that when we light a candle, we're illuminating the darkness and dispelling ignorance. Or when we put the bowls with water on the altar, we are curing our stinginess by making offerings. When we prostrate to the Buddhas, we are working on our arrogance, and we're understanding that the Buddhas in this world are like the torches that illuminate the darkness. Our teachers are the torches that illuminate the darkness, and we bow to them so that we can cut down on our arrogance. You know, insignificant acts, there's no insignificant acts. Everything is utterly meaningful. There's not a single breath that we take that is not meaningful. And that's what practice is, like being aware 60 million thousand times in one space of 1 second. It's not allowing thoughts like a little sentence like, why did he get it and I didn't get it, slip by without knowing what's in that sentence. You know, that is a space of practice. And I encourage all of you to take all the difficult moments, the difficult people, the things you don't like, you know, all the difficult moments, the suffering. Take that as a basis for practice. Don't ask yourself again where to practice. What do I do? How do I do it? That's the practice. Use your analytical mind and like utter honesty within the space, connecting to the space of awareness. Look that, take that and watch all this stuff like stuff on the movie screen. Don't get hijacked by emotions. Watch it and dissolve it by knowing that you are not your thoughts only. You are the nature of mind. There is connect to the bigger space. Watch things and let them dissolve. Like be able to get out of the movie theater. Don't fuse with it. And
How often should I meditate? I think it's really important to make it a regular thing. The best thing you could do is make it part of your daily routine. Um, you know, it's very hard to get any kind of progress or results from doing it once a week or something like that, or when the mood strikes you. If even if you just do a few minutes a day, it's good. You know, that repetition, knowing that every day you're going to do it, and um, maybe create a little space that you feel inspired. If you can carve out a little corner with a cushion or a flower or a picture or a statue or whatever it is. um you know, morning is really good, before you go to bed is good, but really, you know, if you can't do either of those, whenever, but really as much as you can. I mean, there's days when it may be impossible. You have to travel, you have to get up exceptionally early and go to whatever. That's okay. If you miss a day, it is. But the more you commit to making it a daily thing, the better.
and I just want to add to that. So uh, when we say meditate, we're talking about awareness, right? So formal meditation session, when you use calm abiding to distinguish your Buddha nature, your ground awareness as a sky from the clouds, uh, you know you do that in your formal meditation session only to get up and then in the world to continue to observe your mind, to continue to maintain awareness, to be aware of body, speech, and mind actions so that we can interact in a different way with everything and everyone. That awareness must carry with us from our cushion, from a formal meditation session. Also, in formal meditation session, we make an aspiration, may I attain enlightenment in order to liberate all sentient beings. That's our formal meditation session. And then dedicating the merit. But when we get up, we make sure that awareness comes with us all the time. We basically don't want to live without being aware in every moment.
I am a college student. I've been unable to fulfill my tasks and study because I constantly feel like my mind is full of worries and anxious thoughts about future and present. I can see meditation perhaps calming me down during times when these thoughts blossom. But how can I incorporate these ideas outside of plain meditation if I find change of personality so hard? You have to commit to it for a while. It's not, we speak about this a lot. It's not like a quick fix. And it's also, I'm assuming you're just kind of beginning because the way you're speaking about it, I can see meditation perhaps calming me down. So, meditation's not, if it's really not just meant for that 10 minutes you spend every morning or that hour you spend every morning. Meditation in the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, which means to habituate. So what are we habituating? We're habituating looking at our mind, being vigilant about our mind, working with our mind, right? That's not just for the cushion. That's not just for daily meditation. But you need that daily practice to start to have that experience because, you know, the daily activities of eating and, working and walking around and interacting with people create so much, interaction, habitual patterns, all these reactions that we get lost in it. So we need the meditation practice, the daily practice, to start to see that there's another way to approach our thoughts, to work with our mind. Then when we have some kind of stability there and have some experience with it, we can start to bring that into day-to-day life. Maybe you can start to bring that into your experience at school and studying for classes. At the same time, if you have certain anxieties, perhaps, therapy may help you. I mean, we also talk, I think therapy is important if there's certain anxieties that you're really not able to kind of deal with and they're taking over in a certain way. You may need a different perspective. That's also very helpful. But meditation is something that, like it's the very nature of its word in Tibetan, to habituate is something you have to start to really habituate, and you have to the habit of looking at your mind and what it's doing. So when go deal with your mother, you have this ingrained role relationship with your mother. She says, you look like you haven't been eating enough, or you look like you've been eating too much. And immediately this whole history of emotions and reactions and anger and things come up, right? We're kind of rewiring things almost to start say, when she says that, I am aware she's saying that out of her own habitual patterns. And I feel my habitual pattern of defensiveness and anger or whatever it is or hurt come up, but I can just see it as that and not really, it's not really based on anything true. Maybe I am eating, maybe I'm eating fine, or that's irrelevant. It's really not her business how I'm eating or how I'm not eating. And I can just, instead of just attacking, perpetuating this kind of, negative relationship, I could have a little space and act differently. That takes time in practice, and that's why we call it practice. Like playing a musical instrument or playing a sport. You practice. You're not just going to go and be able to play you know a symphony. The second day you play a piano. Um. So
May I add to that?
yeah, please.
when we feel a very compressed space, which is kind of like almost the definition of anxiety. At the center is this I. At the center is the hopes and fears, our expectations and judgments. As Michael said, if you feel like those are very physiological things that they've crossed into where the physiology is not, is not bending but breaking, needless to say, you need to address it on a professional level. At the same time, there's a lot we can do for ourselves working with our mind. That compressed state, it's like a nucleus around the I. And inside the I are all these fears, hopes, and expectations. The pressure of how others view us, the pressure of how we view ourselves in conjunction with that. Am I going to fail if I get a B? Am I going to succeed if I get a B plus? All these kinds of things, you can examine them, make them more spacious, dissolve that compressed nucleatic state, put space into it, and realize these things, they're very important to you right now. But if you just have patience, you'll watch them come and go. What happens is that the very physical state of that compression around the I remains. It's a habitual tendency, becomes like imprinted on us. It's like the scent of perfume in an empty bottle of perfume. The scent still stays. So even when these problems go away, that compressed state often remains because we've habituated ourselves. It's like holding tension in our shoulders and like getting a hump because we walk like this all the time. So you can very much, by sitting in meditation, examine, well, what are these hopes and fears? What is look to causes of anxiety? Find out, is it opinions of your peers, the way you look and you think that people will admire or hate you for certain kinds of things? Are there your parents' expectations? Are there social expectations? How much have you imposed on yourself that you feel is the weight and the pressure of this energy that surrounds the I? And just remember, like I said, the I is not a real thing. It's just a composite of all these ideas and things. And we are responding to those ideas and things, and we feel like that's who I am. But this identity is always shifting. Today you're a student, tomorrow you're an adult, and all these things are forgotten. So look at things, but don't get so hijacked about them. Open up that space by connecting to the spaciousness of your mind. That's meditation.
So things like bad eating habits or eventual reckless sex behavior are more related to our baby minds than karma itself.
Of course, it's us. We're doing it. Nobody's doing it to us.
Well, that is your karma. Your karma is that you're in a space where you're doing these negative behaviors, but karma is not. You have the ability to, if you can become aware of what you're doing, you have the ability to transcend that.
Karma is that when suddenly the mirror is in front of us and we're saying, oh my God, I am doing very destructive things. So it's like that red light where, if we stop thinking of it, oh, why is this bad thing happening to me? If we see it just as this red light and we say, okay, I have to do something. So now it's actually about undoing something. It's about dissolving these things which started as a pleasure and became an addiction, and using all the forces of the mind and therapy or whatever that needs to go into that to liberate from that state. Really, what you're liberating from the affliction of addiction, which at one point was desire that went wild, etc., etc. This is when ordinary things like food and drink and sex, which are normal parts of life, when we crave them so much that they start to kill us, then when they have the power to, we give that power to those things. They're not in themselves. It's not like those things have this magnetic energy that, like a black hole that sucks us in. Well, we create the black hole. We give that energy. And if we want autonomy, we now start to take that energy back and restore the balance. We put the fire of addiction out by mindfulness and quelling it down until it's subdued. And that's liberation, because it's the addiction that's the suffering. It's not the thing that is the suffering, it's the addiction.
Someone's asking for reading materials and the website. Go to Solidago, Solidago Productions.com. There's a list of teachers and there's a list of books. Beginners books. Lately, this book, The Power of Mind by Khentrul Lodro Taye Rinpoche is really good. That should be on the reading list. Can looking in the mirror at karma go too far and tip into intense guilt? How might we change this habit of self-destructive blame?
It's useless. Blame is useless. Blame is anger directed towards oneself. Unquestionably, victims or victimization of oneself is just a form of anger that spills always into into the outside. Because when we present ourselves as a victim with blame and blah blah blah, we're putting others who are interacting with us already into that particular set of how the energy is going to play out. So we're already hurting them because guilt is a subtle form of anger. What is guilt? I'm at the center of it. I mean, remorse is a different thing. Remorse, like at the end of the day, when you do practice, you look at the whole day, what you've done. At that time is when you correct and you vow not to do it again. You go, I shouldn't have said this to my son or to my coworker. I could have been softer here. Tomorrow I will pay attention that my energy is not so edgy, is not so sharp, it's not so like fearful. Let me be more at ease with being compassionate. Let me be more at ease and watch my energy go out into the world, in order to benefit others. Let me, you have remorse. Guilt is just pounding on yourself. And trust me, when you're pounding on yourself, that habitual tendency is for sure acting out in the world, pounding on others. It's, first of all, it's useless, and second of all, you're allowing anger to permeate you, and anything you will touch will be permeated with the same thing. So to know for sure, this whole like this victimization, guilt, pounding on oneself is just a form of anger. But again, not to get more guilty by seeing this, look at it and don't get hijacked away by it. Thoughts like you watching guilt, or you experiencing guilt, they're like little bubbles. Don't jump into the bubble and fuse with it and go off and do more guilting and more pounding and more this and this. No, look at it so that you can start to dissolve it. Know how unnecessary it is. It's just a way of how you habitually experience something, but it is certainly not seeing anything. Because be present in the situation without projections, without the tentacles, without the anger, without the arrogance, without the guilt, without all this stuff. I'm not saying be present, and I'm not saying be like unemotional and unloving, but be present in clarity. And then you don't have to invent or ask yourself what's going on in the situation. You don't have to analyze because you're already there. You're not wasting time. And only when you're present in clarity, without all these entanglements and all this filth internally, can we actually like make right decisions? Can we actually liberate ourselves? You felt guilt? Fine. You say, okay, I felt guilt and now I'm done with you. Like put it aside. There's nothing more to do. Don't go and create more guilt. It's useless. It's just a waste of time, and it's a waste of human precious existence. Our mind is really not for these repetitive, escalations, ups and downs, and blah blah blah. These like running in a cage. The point is to step out of the cage and leave all that crap behind.
Will meditation help my health, intelligence, and creativity? Maybe. You should try it and see. This is a very good question. You talk about anger, jealousy, etc., and I see easily how those are my problems. What about sadness, created by someone's aggressive actions towards me, like physical injury, or emotional, like betrayal? It's hard for me to see what is mine in these heavy feelings of hurting.
Actually, all is mine. When things are happening to me, that's the first thing about suffering, the first teaching of the Buddha. Suffering comes in these with these three molecular components. Karma, cause and effect. If I'm suffering something from someone, it's my karma. So for me to understand it, interdependence. I suffer in conjunction with others. Uh, uh, and impermanence. This suffering will end. So when we know these three components, when we know the molecular structure, we can create space between us and that suffering. Of course, you also have to know that if somebody is delivering a physical injury to you, you have to ask yourself, why are you staying in that space? You know, more than if it happened only once. Why do I remain? And if I do remain, how will I move forward by making sure to eliminate this? Surely my anger or me hitting him back will only get me hitting again, if not immediately, soon thereafter, or whatever. So, understanding and unpacking with this understanding of karma, cause, and effect, that's me. Impermanence, that's me. uh, Interdependence, that's me. And then knowing that the ego structure, that relative aspect of our existence, is ego is not understanding those three things, and ego is, that's ignorance, and ego is anger. Hurtfulness is also anger. It's a form of anger. It's when we feel impotent and, we want to respond with anger, but we feel like we cannot. That is the suffering. The sadness is the suffering. It's like that subtle form of anger, against that other person. What if that other person was someone who was suffering from schizophrenia, and in that schizophrenic bout they hit us? Would we experience it in the same way? So it is up to you to examine the situation, the causes of situation, and to know your karma, cause and effect in relationship to that person, but also on knowing really that person and saying, is that person doing that in clear mind, or they're completely under the affliction of anger or affliction of addiction of a particular kind of behavior? Are they acting in clarity, or are they acting it like in this mentally impaired state? Because trust me, when we're angry, violent, anything, we are mentally impaired. There's no other way of describing ignorance other than a mental impairment. That is the whole thing about Buddhism, is that we look to see that when we are under the sway and power of ignorance and the five tentacles of anger, arrogance, stinginess, uh, um, uh,
Pride.
and pride. Those are the tentacles of how we experience things through the eye, the solid eye. Things are happening against me. How dare they do this to me? Da 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 da. All this narrative. So it's about creating spaciousness inside that, and not for sure dissolving the sadness, because you're going to either choose to be free and to love that person, or you're going to love them and move away from them. So loving from a distance or loving from proximity, but understanding their state of mind as a mental affliction, as a mental illness. If they're acting in that mental affliction toward you, you have choices to make. Certainly it's not a choice to remain sad, because that's just a form of anger paralysis. It's a subtle form of anger and affliction. So it's, of course, dissolving. It's dissolving all those kinds of sufferings for you and the other. Maybe if you choose to be in a distance with that person, you will dissolve, that particular sort of dance that is now taking place between both of you, and you will liberate both of you from that suffering to continue to happen. You may reconvene with that person at a different time, when you no longer when the quality of that energetic exchange has shifted between the two of you, and you feel like the karma has also shifted too. Karma is clouds, remember, it'll come and go. If we choose to remain in an abusive situation, it's our choice. We can't say it's happening to me. I'm a part of it if I choose to stay. you know. And if we do have to stay, if we choose to stay, then we have to redefine how we perceive it. Certainly sadness is just a form of being aggressive, but like suffering it in an impotent way, and that's not being free, and that's not understanding it.
Okay, last question, then we'll wrap it up. I recently read a book from one of the teachers I'm following. He has said that all emotions are pain. That sounds like Zansar Khyentse Rinpoche. He says that very often. Is happiness an emotion? If it is, then why do we seek it? You want to answer that?
I mean, we have to understand that when we say happiness in Buddhism, we are talking about the clear state of mind which understands how things are. That's what happiness is. Happiness, and also sometimes we talk about bliss. Garchen Rinpoche just defined it recently. He said that's when conceptual thoughts dissolve into the space of awareness spontaneously, meaning by themselves. I don't even have to do the work, you know, which that we call meditation and practice. There's to be a huge distinction between pleasure and what we call happiness in Buddhism. If we talk about like eating ice cream and feeling pleasant for a moment, or someone said a flattering thing to us or kissed us and we feel a pleasant thing at the moment, that's not happiness. Those are just those temporary kind of mental clouds which are pleasant as opposed to unpleasant for a moment. That is not what we call happiness. Happiness is a state of mind that is free of all the afflictions. It is the sky of awareness in which we can observe clouds, but the clouds no longer like hijack us. We don't fuse into them. We don't go into sadnesses and angers and this and this and this. We remain in the space of awareness. And when the emotions arise, they dissolve. You know, of course, emotions will arise, thoughts will arise, experiences will always, because I am always created. That's what it means to be in this condition as we are right now. We are created day and night. We wake up happy, 3 seconds later we're anxious, then we're hungry, then I want this, then this, I need to do this. You know, we are constantly, we are these cloud formations. That is what is to be on a relative level. You know, when these clouds stop, our life will cease in this form, in this body. You know, when the cloud formation, or we're like these amazing meditators that can abide in that state all the time until we have to go to the bathroom, or, you know, until the telephone rings or whatever, you know. But happiness is a state of clarity, which is constant, which is ever present. That's what happiness is. And, you know, do not confuse it with samsaric worldly pleasure. That's not what happiness. Happiness is not getting a big house, a big car, getting a kiss on the cheek. No, happiness is when I can love and understand and hold all things in my heart. That's happiness.
And why he says emotions are pain is something like, even something very wholesome, you know, and very important and special, like you have a family. Your family makes you very happy. You have kids, you have a wife, you have a home that makes you happy, but that's all temporary. Eventually, you're going to be separated from them at some point. Either you're going to die, one of them is going to die, your house can fall down, a tornado can hit. All these things, everything's impermanent. So because of the truth of impermanence, these emotions that we get, if they're not these transcendent emotions like she's talking about, where you're, you know, your mind is focusing on the benefit of all beings and that connection to all beings, those other emotions that come up, even as important as they seem, ultimately the temporary. So that pain, when they end, means that their true nature is suffering. I think that's what the teacher is talking about.
For sure.
And then someone, you know, the person who asked the question, will meditation help my health, intelligence, and creativity, felt a little insulted that we laughed at the question. I wasn't laughing at the question. I was laughing at the fact that I wouldn't answer it, because I don't often like to answer questions when people say, what can I, you know, things that are asking, you know, when people are kind of looking at the byproduct rather than you know, the expectation of a result rather than like the need to do it because you know, you're searching towards something, you know that things are plaguing you and you need to create some space and you need to work for, you know, especially being in a creative field. People ask me all the time, does meditation help acting? Does it make you a better actor? Does it make you a better writer or something like that? And I never like to answer that because um, we practice, why we set our intentions the way we do and why we dedicate the way we do is that our practice has to really be geared towards the benefit of all beings, not just for ourselves. So when we're just looking for this result to amplify the self, to make this self that we're so attached to better, um, I don't like to kind of say, well, yeah, this is going to help that because I find that to be not really the purpose. So the question, I mean, it's a perfectly fine question. I didn't mean,
Yes.
I apologize if you felt like I was, uh, you know, laughing at the question. It's just something that I'm approached with a lot, and I always get kind of tight-lipped around it. So that's what I was basically saying.
And also, the Buddhist path is to undo the ego. It's the very kind of, to undo the suffering, we have to undo the ego. That is the first teaching of the Buddha. So, when we're concerned with questions only regarding ourselves, our welfare, we are cultivating our ego. That is it's a good starting point for practice, as long as we understand that those are the very things that we need to work on. Needless to say, we want good health, we want good this and this, but that's not practice. That's just common sense. Eating well, sleeping well, getting a massage, those are the good things we can do for our body. That has nothing to do with practice, really, because practice is about uh, going beyond egoistic mental states, because ego is suffering. The five afflictive emotions arise in conjunction with the ego, and when the ego is the center of our world. So for practitioners, and this is a space for practice, like I mentioned before, it's not the space where we go, what do I do with my bad neighbor? What do I do with my bad dog? No, we're only here to examine our mind. So we start with the ego and the five afflictions as the cause of suffering. That is what we started with saying Buddha discovered this in an experience. It's like he took the spaceship and went to the moon, came back and said, the moon is a real place. We take the spaceship of meditation to discover that the suffering comes from when the ego takes a precedence in our life, because the ego is the five afflictions. That's how we process the whole world through it. And so what comes out, it's like taking food, and what comes out on the other end after we filtered it through our whole body, you know yourself what the result of that is. So we in the space of practice, which is what this is, we start with the premise that we're taking the spaceship beyond this little egocentric of a form of the universe, to see how we can find reality, and go beyond the space.
So when I answered saying it may, but you should try and see. I did really mean that. I
For
do,
yourself.
even though I was laughing at it, but I was more laughing at myself in my answer. So, but it is important for you you're obviously inspired to try it. That's why you're here. So it's important for you to try and see what happens. And, well, do you need to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, for all of us, we sit here to benefit all sentient beings and not just humans. Okay, that's very, very important. This is where we start this space. That's when we start with the aspiration. Remember too that when you go into that mind that transcends the self, you're always included. No fear that we're not in it. We're a part of the all sentient beings. We don't need to work for ourselves. When we work for ourselves is when the suffering really starts to happen. So when we work for the benefit of all sentient beings, magical things happen. Really magical things happen.
That's a good point.
No worries. We're always included.
Okay, sorry we went a long time over, and I'm sorry about that. But next time we'll stick to the usual. Let's dedicate the merit of today's class. Uh, By this merit, may all beings attain the
attain the
state of
state of
enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding
great
waves
waves
of
of
birth,
birth,
old
old
age,
age,
sickness,
sickness,
and
and
death.
death.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Nick.
you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank
Sorry
you
about
all.
going so long today. See you next time, next week, probably Sunday. Take care.